So, welcome everybody to this roundtable discussion on the future of rare diseases in Europe with a special focus on the Nordic region. My name is Vittoria Carraro and I am the Associate Director of Government Affairs at European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs. We are very happy to have this discussion today, and we will look in particular at the ongoing review of the EU legislation focused on medicines for rare diseases, the so-called Orphan Medicinal Products Regulation. And we will do so with the focus on the perspective of rare disease communities in Denmark and Sweden. The EU regulation we will be talking about has been adopted more than 20 years ago, and the review is underway. So we expect a legislative proposal from the Commission later next year. And as the review of the regulation proceeds, at EUCOPE, we have been engaging with national stakeholders. For example, we believe this is really crucial. And back in June, for example, we had a meeting focused on the French perspective of the Orphan Medicinal Regulation review. And we will continue this kind of engagement in the months to come. Today, we are looking at the Nordic perspective. It's an incredibly important region for life science and innovation. And we believe that making the connection between the national and European perspective is really important because of the impact on patients' life, of course, of this regulation, but also the interplay between the European regulation and the national rare disease policies and legislation. So you will hear more about the regulation, how it works, what worked, and its impact from the great keynote speaker and panel we have today. But sure, we can start by saying that European legislation on orphan medicinal products had a huge impact on incentivizing R&D for OMPs. And in fact, to date, since the inception of the regulation, we have 190 products for rare disease approved in Europe. Yet, as the European Commission found in their analysis of the regulation so far, there is more to be done. 95% of rare diseases are still without an authorized treatment. There is a huge unmet need, there is a lot of work to be done, and this topic is really focused for EUCOPE. We represent 130 innovative companies and associations that play a key role in the European pharmaceutical environment. And roughly half of them, they focus on OMPs and they have a commitment to rare disease patients. So we are very happy to have had the chance to organize this meeting today in partnership with IML, which is our member and close partner, and a Swedish industry association that represents small and medium-sized companies focusing on pharmaceutical and advanced medical technology products. I think today we will have a very interesting discussion. We are joined by policymakers, patients, industry representatives from Denmark and Sweden that will help us understand really the perception and once again the impact of the review and how it fits more broadly with the national rare disease policies. So I would like to thank the great panel, the moderator, and you all that tune in today. And on behalf of EUCOPE, I would like to wish you a great meeting. And I will now leave the floor to my colleague from IML, Johan Jarte.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Vittoria. And I do agree with you. It's a great pleasure to see everybody here and to listen to this important symposia or meeting. IML is a quite interesting organization, branch organization, just focusing on this smaller and mid-size life science companies in Sweden. You have to remember that the Nordic, especially Denmark and Sweden, has a long history of innovative companies. We have been top 5 for many years in different ratings from the innovative part in the life science. So with this said, we established 1987, so we have been around quite a lot and been working very closely with LEAF, and it is very good. And we are now aiming to be a part of LEAF, joining forces. That's good. We support the SMEs in Sweden and we help them to grow with these questions that they come up with. It can be day-to-day questions, it can be connecting to other companies, etc. We are seen as the incubator for LEAF, so we have had numerous of companies coming into IML and have been there and growing and being part of then moving up to LEAF, who takes care of the larger companies in Sweden. We offer them, we offer these companies optimal support and service. We arrange different educations. We arrange meetings. We let them to come together and discuss this. And by all means, at last, we have continuous dialogue with the Swedish healthcare system, the politicians, the government, etc., for all the life science question. And we can help to open doors and help with lobbying as well. And the last picture is just a glimpse over how many companies we represent in Sweden together with LEAF. And this is quite a lot and quite substantial. So looking forward to this meeting. Thank you very much for arranging this one, Victoria and Lars. Thanks.
And thank you to Victoria and to Johan for this very nice introduction. My name is Lina Friesen. I'm from Denmark. I have a degree in biology, and I will moderate today's session. And of course, thank you to EUCOPE for arranging this very important roundtable discussion. We have a lot of distinguished guests with us today, and it is indeed a very important session because how do we see the future of rare diseases in Europe? How do we make sure that the new legislation that has to be made here within the next couple of years has to be revised? How do we make sure that that actually helps us move forward? So put on stake, how do we ensure the right help for people and relatives with rare diseases? Progress have been made the last 2 decades, but there is a lot to be done yet. So I'm very happy to introduce the program for today. In a couple of minutes, we'll hear today's keynote speaker, Terkel Andersen. He has worked most of his life in the field of rare diseases and is still today the chairman of EURORDIS, that is the European Rare Diseases Organization. Terkel has a very deep insight into the progress that has been made the last 2 decades and into the structure of the European legislation. So I'm really looking forward to hear from Terkel. And then afterwards, we'll have the panel discussion with the following guests. We have Lina Nordqvist, who is member of the Swedish Parliament for Liberalerna, and she's their healthcare policy spokesperson. She has a background as a pharmacologist, and she's been doing research into development of new medicines, especially into diabetes. We have Birte Byskov Holm from Denmark. She's a lawyer and a year-long voluntarily fighter for people with rare diseases. She is president of the umbrella organization here in Denmark for rare diseases, and she's a board member of EURORDIS and also a member of the Committee of Orphan Medicinal Products, which is part of the European Medicines Agency. Then with us, she'll only join she won't join until 12:30 due to other meetings, but we'll have with us for the panel discussion, Pernille Weiss. She is member of the European Parliament for the Conservatives in Denmark. She has a background as a nurse and a degree in innovation and management. She's worked in psychiatry and home care. She's an entrepreneur and has worked at different areas. And now she's devoted her work to the EU level. And in the EU, she works specifically as a healthcare expert. And then finally, in the panel, we have Jonas Wickman from Sweden. He has a background in communication. He has worked with welfare and as a political advisor. And for the last 6 years, he's worked in the pharmaceutical area as a director of government and international affairs at the Swedish Trade Association for the research-based pharmaceutical industry. So indeed, a really strong panel with a lot of knowledge and different backgrounds into this area. And I think that together with the different angles, we can really move forward or make this discussion move forward. So of course, thank you to all of you in the panel to find time today. I know you're really busy. And to you who are joining us, watching this online session, of course, thank you also to you taking your time. I know that that more than we hoped for signed up, so that is really great. And now first, of course, the keynote session, and then the first around 20 minutes, half hour, the panel will discuss internally with my questions, but then we'll open up for questions from you. So please don't hesitate to use the Q&A button in the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. And also feel free to use the chat function throughout the whole session if you want to share knowledge or comments between each other. But again, welcome to all of you. And maybe I should here in the end also just note that this session is being recorded. But I think that we should really get started with this important session. And therefore I would like to give the word to the keynote speaker of today, Terkel Andersen, a man with a big heart and a lot of will and knowledge. The word is yours, Terkel.
Thank you, Lina, and thank you to EUCOPE for organizing this online roundtable on rare diseases and the ongoing revision of the orphan and pediatric medical regulations, and with an emphasis on the Nordic perspective. Let me share my screen first. So, here we go. Full screen. The title of this event is The Future of Rare Diseases in Europe, which is quite an ambitious title, but one which, in my opinion, has a lot of meaning. The future of rare diseases and the future of rare disease patients does not rely only on the orphan drug regulation. It depends on the entire framework which will be provided to support research and development of therapies. It also depends on how this framework should facilitate collaboration on uptake and access to allow rare disease patients to benefit from new therapies. The orphan drug regulation has been a major driver for accelerating research and development for rare disease therapies. In fact, adoption of the regulation was a really defining moment, since this was the first EU legislation to define and describe the challenge of rare diseases, later followed by a number of specific initiatives in recommendations, other decisions, regulations, and directives. The regulation has been very productive, with more than 200 products reaching market authorization, and with an estimated potential impact for more than 6 million EU citizens. There is no doubt that the regulation has stimulated research and development. But the regulation has not delivered on all parameters, and certainly not resulted in equal access to treatments across the estimated more than 6,000 rare diseases, let alone bringing rare disease patients to the same level of access to treatment as patients with more common conditions. Though the vast majority of genetic rare diseases emerge in childhood, most new orphan drugs target the adult population. The regulation has been of most value to a limited number of diseases, although with a relatively high prevalence, while the most rare diseases have seen less impact. So what does this mean? It actually means that 55% of the marketing authorizations have been given to diseases with a prevalence of 1 to 5 in 10,000, so meaning to the most prevalent diseases. The ultra-rare diseases on the left side of the screen, with a prevalence of less than 1 in 100,000, make up 89% of all rare diseases, meaning that for more than 5,000 rare diseases, no new treatments have been developed. There is a clear tendency towards crowding of new products and therapies in a small number of rare disease areas such as oncology, to some extent hematology, and metabolic diseases. It is interesting that the proportion of orphan medicinal products with a marketing authorization in oncology is actually higher than the percentage of orphan designations in the field of oncology. This demonstrates that a mature healthcare provision, as we see it in cancer, and programs to support progress in one area, facilitates successful product development. It also indicates that the supply side research and development is not the only driver for investing in new therapies to be sponsored. The demand side is equally important, and I'll come back to that. A rare parameter survey that we conducted in EURORDIS in our panel of more than 10,000 patients show that only a small proportion of patients have curative, meaning really transformative treatments, with a few exceptions, all in cancer. There are exceptions from this, like gene therapies in some immunodeficiencies, some of the replacement therapies, but actually very, very few therapies for the general area of rare diseases, which are truly curative. So it's fair to say that all rare diseases still have significant unmet needs, and 39%, as it shows, are reporting not experiencing any kind of treatment. Even when a new orphan drug has obtained a market authorization, there is no guarantee that patients can actually access treatment. Later this month, you will see the publication of a report from the Imperial College of London, a report which is part of the Rare 2030 project that EURORDIS has been piloting and which has been initiated by the European Parliament and the Commission, of course. The average delay between market authorization and patient availability for orphan drugs can be as short as 3.5 months in some countries and for some of these drugs. But it can also be as long as 3.6 years. And some never get to that point. So if you go through the bar at the bottom with the different colors, you will actually see that there is a great difference in the number of products which have been recognized for reimbursement. So each member state actually does impose its own HTA procedures, which do result in significant delays and sometimes to no access at all. I would invite you particularly to study the differences between the Nordic countries, where you can see that Sweden, Norway, and Finland have, among these 47 products studied, actually only recognized and for reimbursement half of these products, or 22 around that. So there is a need to react and to revise our strategies according to these problems. To reach the most rare among the rare diseases, there is a need to rethink the entire ecosystem for research and development, and we should, because innovation in science around, in particular, genetic diseases holds a lot of promise to make us achieve much more in the coming 20 years than what we have seen for the first 20 years of this regulation. There is clearly a need to find ways to identify and target the unmet needs of rare diseases, and especially those which are ultra-rare, and to create incentives to support this. Back in 2017, the International Research Consortium, ERDIC, assessed that it would be realistic to achieve 1,000 new therapies by 2027. Unfortunately, we believe that we will fall short of this target unless we adapt the current system to be more supportive and combine the different areas of relevance to optimize the pathway from basic science through development and clinical testing, and use data collection of real-world evidence in the European reference networks. This is why EURORDIS has been piloting the Rare 2030 project, which outlines recommendations on all aspects of the ecosystem, which must be in place to take advantage of the promising opportunities provided by science. Access to high-quality care depends on faster, earlier, and more accurate diagnosis, available, affordable, and accessible treatments, innovative and needs-led research and development, and applying digital health data collection across Europe and in cross-border collaboration. For the OD regulation framework, this means that we should, in fact, establish streamlined regulatory pricing and reimbursement policies, and these policies should encourage a continuum of evidence generation along the full life cycle of products or technology. And we should have a European ecosystem able to attract investment in areas of unmet need, foster innovation, and address the challenges of healthcare system sustainability. So our key recommendations are that we should make, for instance, as a subgroup of the COMP committee, the Committee for Orphan Medicinal Products in the EMA, make a multi-stakeholder collaboration to identify unmet needs. We should develop a graduated system of incentives where we could reward early dialogue and reach ways of funding the therapies where there are no options at this point. We should introduce an incidence criteria to make sure that the legislation actually serves the more rare diseases. We should create a stronger mandate for COMP, professionalizing it and making sure that it can also design, for instance, investigating protocols to advise companies and for that to pave the way for a more lean progress towards marketing authorization. And with a larger scope, we should make sure that we have a functional and efficient EU health technology assessment framework where we could hopefully avoid the kind of delays that I have portrayed earlier. We should generate a European table of negotiation so that we will have equal pricing and reach the kind of sustainability that would in fact lead to. And we should also make sure that we have funds to finance a real-world evidence generation. So this would lead us to, I think I'll skip this one, to actually rethink the regulation, not only in its own right, but actually to integrate it into a new policy framework with clear targets of what we want to achieve, with clear indicators, bringing more adherence and more alignment from the member states, and to make sure that we have positive alignment of EU policies and initiatives to support the development which is possible over the next 10 years in rare diseases. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terkel, for this really, really nice overview. Indeed, it gives us a good background also to have this panel discussion on. And as mentioned in the beginning, the next hour will now be panel discussion. And in the panel, if any of you have joined after the introduction, I'll just mention once again shortly who we have in the panel. We have Lina Nordqvist, Swedish member of the Swedish Parliament for the Liberals and a healthcare policy spokesperson. We have Birte Byskov Holm, president of the patient group Rare Diseases Denmark. We do have Pernille Weiss, if she has joined us already. She is with us now. Hi, Pernille, great you found the time to join us also. Member of Parliament for the Conservatives in Denmark and also a healthcare expert. And then we have Jonas Wickman, Director of Government and International Affairs at the Swedish Trade Association for the research-based pharmaceutical industry. Welcome to all of you. Now, I would like to start with you, Lina. As a member of the National Parliament in Sweden, how important is the European regulation on rare diseases for you when you have to make your national regulations and strategies in Sweden?
Well, I think it's extremely important for all of us, but I think that I, as a Liberal, see it as even more important because we want a closer collaboration. We think that it's good for all of us, especially for patients, and especially for patients with rare diseases where there might not be so many in a medium-sized country like mine, for instance, Sweden. So we need to collaborate together. We need to learn from each other. We need to have common infrastructures. There's loads we can do together that we couldn't do as well alone.
So, knowing that it is so important to you, what specific changes would you like to have in the revised legislation?
Oh, loads of things. I think that we need to somehow pave the way forward with common infrastructure to be able to, in a safe way and in an integrity protecting way, collect data. We need data to, of course, for research, for innovation, but also when treatments are approved, to know who is it good for, who is it not good for, what do we need to look out for. So a common infrastructure for data collection would be very valuable, I think. But I also think that we need to look a bit ahead and think, should we maybe have not only collaborations between universities and such things, but also centers of excellence working with knowledge together, but also with actually treating each other's patients. I think that that's the right way to go when it comes to very difficult or very, very rare treatments. That, well, I want the best treatment if it's a serious condition, and I wouldn't mind going to Hamburg or go to Rome. I just want to feel better.
No, so what you mean by these expert centers? Then you would send patients from all over Europe to the few expert centers. So you would actually travel across Europe.
I think we should see it as a possibility. I think sometimes knowledge can travel without anyone moving. Other times, a very skilled person could travel to the patient. But at times, yes, I think that patients would prefer traveling if they get the very best care. And I think that in Europe, we can do this together much better than we could on our own.
Thank you very much, Lina. We'll of course get back to you, but now I would like to get you, Pernille Weiss, into the discussion. As a member of the European Parliament for Denmark, how much focus is there actually on rare diseases in the European Parliament?
Thank you for asking me, and also thank you for allowing me to be a part of this activity today. It's a very timely and needed event, and I also hope that we can make some ripple effects after this noon session, because we really needed to push for better legislation and better and stronger strategies, not only for rare diseases, but also with the pharma strategy that is actually ongoing right now in the European Parliament, and where I am the spokesperson for EPP on the ITRA committee. To your question, coming from a very, very little country that Denmark is, although we are very big in innovation and very big also in life science, and we have more or less first mover public sector that serves many purposes, and citizens and families, especially also people who have rare symptoms and rare diseases. That said, I must actually acknowledge that the focus on rare diseases and the accessibility, the affordability of medicine for those citizens are more on the top agenda here in Brussels, or at least in between other member states in Europe than I sometimes think we can do in Denmark. And maybe that is because, and that is where Lina is touching upon something that is very delicate, because healthcare is a national competence. So the way we organize ourselves, but also the way we prioritize the costs of treatments and the choice of different treatments is a national competence. But that said, I am positive towards taking up some of the ideas that Lina comes with, also because I cannot explain to either patients and voters with rare diseases or family who knows about rare diseases, but also not to my electors, why we not in the union can help each other more. Also because EU is the union of member states who cooperate on what we cannot do alone individually, and rare diseases is actually something that falls into that part of the subsidiarity equation. Also because I think if we improve how we tackle rare diseases and how we attract and innovate together with the life science industry and especially pharma industries on rare diseases, I have this positive suspicion that will actually also increase the interest for investors and pharma industries to go for Europe when they have to choose a place on the globe to develop their business. And that will also be in the benefit not only for rare diseases but for the healthcare profile of the Europeans as a whole. So that is my maybe a little long answer to that good question. Thank you.
Oh, but that was interesting. And now we just heard Lina answering what she sees as some of the most important things she would like to change in the revised version. Do you have any specific areas where you see the biggest need for change?
The biggest need for change is actually what the Commission pointed out as the first dot of their dots to be followed, and that is the that medicine should actually be developed for rare diseases. And so what is very, very important in the revision of the rare diseases directives, but also in the pharma industry strategy, is that if we do not improve these tools, the strategies and the directives, then we cannot attract the pharma industries and the researchers and the environment that actually makes it possible for us to develop what is still not there on the market, but also in a way where the affordability and accessibility needs are being met. So that is the most important thing I would say to work on, because it's kind of a silver bullet. If we can catalyze the actual development, then we solve a lot of other parts of the big equation dealing with accessibility and approval, the assessment and authorization, etc., etc. Those are following means to the pivotal end, I would say.
Thank you, Pernille. And now, Birte Byskov, I'll tune onto you because as a long-time fighter for people with rare diseases, what is on top of your mind when it comes to the future of rare diseases in Europe? You need to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. First of all, I would like to bring up some comments on how we as patient organizations actually work. And also especially in the Nordic countries, like for instance, Denmark and Sweden that we are talking about now. It's important to understand that the contribution to the public consultation from the European community of people of rare diseases given through EURORDIS and as put forward or made presentation by Terkel Andersen is a joint statement where the Nordic rare people and their organization as members of EURORDIS and are active partners. And I hope that the contribution and the proposals will be taken into consideration and appreciation because they are based on the rare people experience over the last 20 years. And the Nordic rare people and their organization has contributed in many, many ways, both on European and on national level. As it was said, I have spent much time at the Committee for Orphan Medicinal Products belonging to European Medicine Agency, EMA, for 12 years. And I also have to say that the contribution to the public consultation given by EURORDIS is sanctioned by the board of EURORDIS that include both the chair of Rare Diseases Denmark, which is me, and my good colleague Maria Montemfusco, the chair of the Swedish National Alliance Rare Diseases Sweden. So I can say, don't worry. There's no reason to question the commitment and engagement of the Nordic rare disease community.
Thank you, Birte. And just the last question for you before heading on to Jonas. So what are your biggest concerns now with the negotiations with around new legislation is already starting or have taken place for some time? What are your biggest concerns with the new?
Yes. Well, what I'm thinking is that I really hope that we have come to a turning point and really take stock on what we have learned and now overcome the obvious barriers when it comes to development, but also the rare patient access to treatment. Much has been done, of course, but we need to go further. And after 20 years with the regulation, still having 95% of the rare diseases without a real treatment, we call it unmet need, shall it take another 20 years to gain 5% more? Hopefully not. And we still have a big challenge when it comes to ensure access for the patients to treatment. If the patients do not get access, why all the effort? That was trying to phrase my concern in a positive way.
Thank you very much, Birte. And for the last panelist today, Jonas Wigman, Director of Government and International Affairs at the Swedish Trade Association for the Research-Based Pharmaceutical Industry. Jonas, as a representative for this research-based pharmaceutical industry in Sweden, what do you see as the most important thing to ensure in the new European regulations on rare diseases to ensure that we have this development of new medicines as the other people in the panel asks for?
Thank you, Lina, for the question, and thank you for the possibility to participate in this discussion. I would say this is one of the key discussions within the field of pharmaceuticals as for now. And echoing what Terkel said in his keynote speech, looking at the development on orphan drugs, it's a fantastic development during the last 20 years. We went from basically none or a few drugs at the year 2000 to more than 200 today. And to add to that fact, I was looking at the last overview of ongoing drug development from FPA. 41% of all drugs in clinical trials today has orphan designation. So we are in a place where this is one of the key areas of development of new drugs now. So this is 20 years ago, the big drugs were blockbusters. They were for broad patient groups. So much is being done today for orphan drugs. It's fantastic to see. I would say this is the global picture, and the European Union has a strong footprint in this development today. If we are to adjust the EU legislation in this field, I think it's very important to bear in mind the global competitiveness. And the EU Commission states by themselves, they want to boost the sector's global competitiveness, not only to maintain, but to boost. Then we need to be very well aware of, when we're looking at investment in R&D, how are we to boost the investment in R&D orphan drugs in Europe in comparison with the US or Japan. So if we are to alter, we need to be very well aware of what is the situation in other regions. When we're looking at production and export revenues, this is the same. Do we want to have a strong footprint from the industry within the European Union? Then we need to be very aware of the competitive situation globally. And if we want to have patient access to these drugs, we need to have academia, industry, and healthcare working together on these issues. So I would say that kind of mindset, I think it's the key when you're looking at changes in this field. To some extent, it's not strange to look into a legislation since it's 20 years since it was adopted. At the same time, you need to be aware of the changes in other markets. Japan, China, Asia is developing very fast today, so we need to be up to speed, so to speak, with developments in other parts of the world.
And to ensure this both competitiveness and this sort of continuing the good process of developing new medicines, what do you see as the biggest specific obstacles right now for this development for the research-based pharmaceutical industry?
I would say in Europe. So this is the European legislation is the foundation for investment in R&D and the market authorization. But when it comes to access and affordability, the main part of decisions is nationally when it comes to pricing, reimbursement, funding, healthcare systems, recommendations, and so forth. So I would say it's key when you're looking at access and affordability. You cannot only look at the EU legislation. You need to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue step by step to look into what is the root cause of when we have access problems, because we all want patients to have access to innovative, effective treatments. And we need to step by step look at these root causes. And obviously the legislation is a key part of this, but it's not the only part. So we need to understand what is the actual problem and how are we to solve them step by step. That is one part. The other part, I would say, is that looking at the healthcare systems and the systems for pharmaceuticals, they were very much developed for the last 10 or 20 years for blockbusters, for big products, for big groups of patients. And we have very good systems for these drugs when it comes to reimbursements, HTA assessments, generic competition, and so forth. So we have robust systems. We know how to do this. When it comes to these orphan drugs, they do not really fit in the existing system. So we need to have an ongoing dialogue on how to adjust, because this is where the medical research is going. This is where R&D is performed today, and we need to adjust the system to really give patients access to these new innovations as they are approved. And that is the ongoing dialogue, and echoing what Berta said, this is what I see it is going on in Sweden, and it is going on in other countries as well.
Thank you. And I just want to mention to all of you in the panel that if you want to comment on each other's points, please use the raise hand button in the bottom of the screen. Then I know that you want to comment on anything. But I would like to start with you again, Pernille. Now, Jonas, he mentioned that we really need to look at the international competitiveness. You have China, you have the US, you have Japan. Is there anything that you're aware of in the European Parliament discussing this, that we can also do things to, to attract companies, and how do we do that?
Oh, there's a lot of things we can do, but I would like to pinpoint one thing that I think we should take down and use very actively, at least in Denmark. I don't have the number for Sweden and the other Nordic countries, but the public funding over the GDP for research and development is, we have an agreement in the Union to use 3% of the GDP on research. We only in Denmark keep ourselves just around 1.5 because of a fiscal rule that whenever a university or department in a university attracts external funding from either EU funds or private fundings, then they are being cut in the public funding. I know for certain that is not the mechanism in Norway. And I think we should push the awareness to the national politicians of why they allow that to happen, also because it's a common shared phenomenon in the whole EU that we promise to use 3% of the GDP. No one actually does. Some regions do, but not all 27 countries. And when we see and compare us to either west or east, especially east, then we are lagging behind on funding for research and development. And that's also a part of what can damage our innovative muscle. It's not only a matter of being free-thinking researchers who pursue to use their heads to make a difference for unmet needs in medicines and in many other sectors. But if we do not appreciate and nurture this longing and this entrepreneurship of research and development by funding, then we will, in the end, decline our European healthcare profile. And that is the foundation of a strong economic muscle, that we have a workforce of all citizens that can contribute to take care of Europe and our values. So
and is this, Pernille, and is this something that you, as a member of the parliament in Europe, try to push, to the national country?
Yeah.
Because it is a bit, it's not all right that hardly any country uses.
Exactly.
And so how come you, or what kind of muscle do the EU have to push for a bigger part being used for research?
Well, it would be, sometimes it would be very interesting to see what actually happens in the council meetings on this question here, because we in the European Parliament, I think we can all, roughly, all of us can agree to the fact that if we make an agreement to use 3% of the annual GDP on research and development, so we also expect the member states to do. But when we then see on the data that is not happening, then we are puzzled, and the best place to take up that conversation is actually in the council and in between the ministers of research, innovation, etc., going up to, actually, I would recommend also to the heads of states. It would be wonderful if they at least once a year could have research and development part of their agenda, and also to address this matter on funding and how we support the innovation in the union.
And Lina, do you know what it looks like in Sweden? And Jonas also mentioned that we also need this national level to push for better, better for the pharmaceutical industry to actually be able to develop these new medicines. So you also, we need the push from the EU level, but we also need the push from the national level. How do you see this in Sweden? How's it going?
Well, I'd say we most certainly need to do both, because the Swedish expression of looking into your own belly button is pretty spot on in this case. That if Sweden does it, that if we do things our way, and Germany do things their way, and Denmark do things their way, we will miss very good examples, and we might risk not to share good examples, but we will also risk, of course, to keep doing things the wrong way. And that goes with research and development, but also when it comes to knowledge, I'd say, when it comes to access, models of financing, the things that Jonas was talking about. Because we're all somehow trying now to take one step at a time, trying to find better ways of financing these new treatments, better ways of making sure that effective new therapies actually reach the patients without unnecessary delay once we know they're good. But we've chosen pretty different ways of trying to achieve this. And I think that we really need to look at the other countries in the EU and see what do they do that we might actually learn from. What can we do? For us in Sweden, for instance, we right now have a pretty, how should I say, it's a very safe procedure, but it might not be the quickest one. We need to speed it up. We need to find ways to make sure that people get their treatment. When there is one, they should get it. And we also need to make sure that our 21 regions are not the ones paying for things that might actually make them end up not having money enough to pay for the common illnesses that many people have. We need to do this together, not only, I'd say, when it comes to Sweden, as countries in the EU, but also as regions in Sweden. So we need to look at all levels, and I'd say the only way we can do this is to be attentive to what the patients and their relatives say, attentive to what pharmaceutical industry needs to help us out, and attentive when it comes to what other countries do that works. Could we steal their examples? I think we need to be thieving magpies when it comes to politics, and especially in this area. Thank you.
Birte, I know that you, of course, try to lobby a lot also for the politicians in Denmark, and you also work at the European level. How do you see, or what is the answer you get when there is not enough money on the Danish budget for research, which is also, of course, affecting the research in the rare disease area? And on top of that, are there any specific wishes for either Lina, who's a national politician in Sweden, though, or for Pernille, something you would wish for them to push for in the meetings with their colleagues?
What I would like to say first is that I agree very much what Lina is actually saying about how it works and how it not works in this framework. And can we find some good examples of how to work together? Because you are totally right that at gathering evidence, data, knowledge about rare diseases is very, very difficult with this very scattered patient groups, especially in small countries like Denmark. If we see on the good examples for cooperation, why not look at the cooperation that has been developed in Europe when it comes to make market authorizations? It's actually succeeded to make the European countries to work together, to make a framework and actually respect the decisions made by EMA and the countries, of course, all the states when it comes to market authorizations. Why shouldn't it be possible to continue the process, to continue to develop a model, a framework, for instance, for collection of real-world data? We are talking all the time on after market authorization, you need to gather more evidence because the evidence from the market authorization is so weak. Why not really make a European cooperation on collecting real-world evidence to follow up the market authorities? It's just one way. When we can do it, giving market authorities, why can we not do it when it comes to collect the evidence you are missing for going on taking national decisions? I would say that even if we have made progress, we don't have done enough with the regulation. I think we need better tools for the rare disease people to have access to treatment like patients with more common diseases. I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult for you in EU Parliament and so on, and also the national national policy. I know it's difficult, but we are ready, patient organizations. If you want to discuss with us, if you want to meet patients, if you want to have our visions clarified, just call upon us. We are ready. We are ready to answer your questions and discuss with you how this could go on from the patient's view.
So an invitation from Birte Byskov that you can just reach out. She's ready.
Yes,
the rest of
and
her
I can also say that I'm sure that my good colleague from Sweden, Maria von Montefusco, the chair of the Swedish Rare Disease Organization, she will welcome any call from you to discuss the situation. So we are ready.
And I'll just ask one more question for Jonas, and then I'll open up from questions from the audience. And I can tell there's already quite a few questions that have come into the Q&A box here in the bottom. But Jonas, besides maybe commenting on a few of the things said, I also do know, because we've touched upon collaboration throughout Europe, I know that Ursula von der Leyen has touched upon, should we have actually a EU healthcare? And now Lina also talks about expert centers. How do you see that? So, or do you see any perspective in that idea from the pharmaceutical side?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that is a key question where we are as for now. Number one, looking at Europe, I don't see a taste in foreseeable time, healthcare will be a national priority and competence. The countries will still perform healthcare within the European Union. Though, in what areas do we see it's rational from the principle of subsidiarity to do this on a European level? That is the key question. Looking at EMA, I think it started some 25 years ago, and nobody is questioning the role of EMA today. It's one of the leading authorities in the world. And we are looking now at the ongoing HTA legislation that is being processed within the Brussels system. That could be a next step. And I would say when the pandemic is over, because sooner or later it will be over, I think it's a good time to look at the roles of the European institutions and the roles of the national healthcare systems, and are we well positioned, or are the learnings that can make us adjust the system? So I think this is a good discussion, but I don't foresee a European healthcare system where the Commission has hospitals and primary care settings in place in Europe. So I think it's a smart discussion to continue. I would also like to comment on what Pernilla very well said initially on the investment in R&D as share of GDP. This is the long-term cornerstone for innovative industry countries, as many of the European countries are. Sweden is actually one of the countries that are above 3%, even though somewhat in decline. I would say this is super crucial long-term. And even though we still have substantial investments, we are small as countries, and the world is getting more and more global. So I think this is also an area where we need to look at what can be the next step for international cooperation when it comes to academia and research and development. And we see this after the pandemic. And when it comes to medical research in Europe, the UK was number one. I'm sorry to say, but this is, they had the biggest share of the spending in the European joint processes and projects. So after the pandemic, as the UK is not a part of the European Union anymore, how can we position the European Union in the field of research and development for the years to come? I think that is a super crucial question. So thank you, Pernilla, for bringing that one to the table.
And I think that both Lina and Pernilla has raised hands to give comments on this. And if we can just make it quite short, then we can head on to some of the many questions from the audience. But Pernilla, would you comment first?
Thank you so much, also because I'm leaving in a couple of minutes. So thank you for that. And also thank you for allowing me to participate, although I cannot be to the end. Just a small note on the matter on subsidiarity. And wouldn't it be easier if we had one size fits all healthcare system in the Union? Actually, I will oppose very feisty on that one, because what made the European economy so strong is actually the positive sides of competing with each other, inspiring each other, cooperating with each other. That is the nerve and the DNA of how to be a European, that we co-create with each other. So if we think that all Europeans, all half a billion citizens think alike and organize themselves alike, then actually we will destroy what is so uniquely the essence of EU and Europe, namely that we are independent states who voluntarily work together in the strongest possible way for what we cannot do ourselves by our own. So that's a more ideological approach to that. And that said, I think that we will see in the future more cooperation, more stronger cooperation in between member states in the framework of the Union to healthcare and the rare diseases needs. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to continue having dialogues and contacts with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pernille, for joining us, finding your time in your busy day, but I'm sure
of course, always. Thank you.
Bye. And Lina, then you also had a comment for Jonas.
Well, yes, thank you. I just want to emphasize, so I'm not fired as a spokesperson for my party, that I don't think anyone wants appendices being removed or healthcare centers being some kind of big, huge European collective health system. That's not my point, and I don't think anyone wants it. What I do think is that in the cases where we have 15 or sometimes maybe even 8 patients in an entire country, then there might not be enough knowledge. There might not be any chance of getting the perfect treatment, that once in a lifetime treatment that you need. And then I think we need to collaborate. We don't need to fusion our healthcare systems together, but we need to see in what cases is healthcare something so difficult and so revolutionary that we can't do it on our own. We can't compare these rare disease patients with people with sinusitis, and that's my point. But I totally agree that we're separate countries, but we're separate countries with very, very common interests, and the patient's best needs to be in our focus. Thank you.
And it is a really good point, Lina, that there are so few people, even if you take Europe together, so we really need to collect data, we need to work together. So I think it's a really important point when it comes to rare diseases. And Jonas, I would like now to bring in a question from Georgi Stefanov, and he says that the current trend shows that orphan drugs are usually developed by startups and research-based units, which are closer and understand patient unmet needs better, rather than big medium pharma industry. What is the opinion of you, for instance, on pan-European incentives for supporting innovation for such startups?
Thank you for the question, and I think this is what we see. We see a new way of interact between the small startups, the smaller companies, and the bigger one with more competences and capabilities. That is clear when you're looking at the development of COVID vaccines, for instance, where we have BioNTech and Pfizer and a few other examples too. So what we see is an emerging way how smaller companies are interacting and cooperating with the bigger ones. And there are lots of examples of this. So I think this is where development are happening today. I think this is a key part of what is happening. If we're going so far, so we are speaking about European incentives, well, we have the incentives in the ongoing, in the existing legislation. So we have existing incentives in that part, and that has been key. If we are to add other ones, happy to discuss, of course. At the same time, echoing what has been said before, we see within the European Union, the healthcare is national. So we need to have a smart dialogue between the countries on these kind of medicines, where we have a few patients in every country. How do we do this smartly together onwards?
Thank you, Jonas. And now there is a rather long question from Tobias Heidorn, so please listen carefully. Tobias Heidorn is representing both the European and German patients associations for phenylketonuria and allied disorders. And his question goes like, with their initial impact assessment, the European Commission proposed several options to amend the current orphan drug legislation. However, these proposals remain very vague and unspecific, and thus leave room for speculation. What does unmet medical needs mean? Shall an orphan drug for a disease with an existing therapy no longer be incentivized? We shall not accept any division of the rare disease community into those with less and those with more unmet medical needs. I think I'll cut it here for a start, and maybe Birte, you could start. Do you see this danger if we sort of split groups into rare diseases with more unmet needs than other?
Maybe I could also ask for Terkel to join me in this. When we talk about unmet need, it's not only groups with nothing at all. So we have patient groups with no offer at all, and we have patient groups that have some offers, but it's not really should we say a treatment for their disease, but maybe some kind of treatment that can help something, but not really benefiting or enough for the patient groups. What has been said also from our side is that you have to do some work actually to sit together and define what unmet need really is. You have to have a basic on what do we mean with unmet need and what is actually to do about it. The reason for that many rare diseases do not have any treatment or anything ongoing has also to do with, you should say, lack of research, lack of knowledge about the disease, the nature of the disease. So it's not just enough to say go there and develop some treatment. You also need to have the basic for to understand the disease and to actually have some basic research to find out what can be done. I don't see this approach that it should make an, should we say, division between different kind of diseases. It's more to ensure that that all the rare diseases actually can look forward to development of treatment, and of course also the access to treatment. And again, the last thing I would say is that we have to see the situation for the rare disease patients in a bigger framework than just how we make benefits for developing a specific treatment. We have to see it in combination of many efforts that you have to make to really bring treatment to also to the rare disease patients.
Mm. And also, Birte, I know that both you and Terkel has been part of making this EURORDIS response to the European Commission Inception Impact Assessment. And if you read through this paper, of course, it's clear that you really want to help all the people with rare diseases.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And I just want maybe Lina could bring this on now when Pernille is not with us any longer. And I know, Lina, that you work closely, of course, with your colleague from Sweden in the European Parliament, because he comes with the advice that rather than proposing unspecific amendments of prevalence criteria and incentives like market exclusivity, the EU Commission should challenge the subsidiarity principle and mandate all member states to reimburse safe and effective orphan drugs. So that is a comment, of course, you could bring on to your colleague in the European Parliament. And then I would like to go to a rather short question from Jakob Rasch. What tangible actions can be made right now in order to close the gap between EMA approval and patient access? And I don't know if you would like to answer that question. I don't think there's probably an easy answer, but any specific actions right now to be made or that can be made? Do you have any ideas, Lina? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have any ideas, mostly speculations, I think. Well, I'm thinking that if we compare, I don't know, high blood pressure treatment to some of these rare disease treatments, then I think that it's impossible to demand the same amount of data before taking action. And I think that goes with approvals or some kind of tentative approvals, as well as with financing. That we need to somehow understand that to be absolutely certain would sometimes take 20 years. Is that what we want? No, it's not. So I think we need to look at how much data do we need before we can say, okay, let's go ahead for a while, but keep a close eye on this. And we're not very good at that, at least not in Sweden. We're very rigid when it comes to things are pretty digital. It's approved or it's not. It's subsidized or it's not. And I think we need to have another way of thinking. We need to realize that at some point in time, we need to say we're sure enough to go ahead, but we're also ready to pull back. That's what we need to do, I think, because then we could quicker get medications, treatments to the patients, and we would at the same time get more data quicker. Thanks.
So we actually need to dare a little bit more than we do today, and so we can move quicker. Jonas, you also had a comment on this?
Yes, thank you. I think you're absolutely right, Lina. When you're comparing the orphan drugs with the bigger, the medicines for the bigger patient group, this is one of the key problems. We have been used to big randomized clinical trials with tens of thousands of patients. This will never happen with these diseases. So we need to develop a new mindset and systems and principles for how to assess these in a systematic way. I think that is key. As an answer to the question that was very direct, I would say the ongoing HTA legislation discussion could be a key step forward. It won't solve everything, but it could be a next step. And I would also push for a multi-stakeholder discussion on the root causes for problems with availability and access, because this is not only European legislation. So we are, from an FPA perspective, pushing for a high-level forum on this discussion. I think that would be a key next step to step by step look into the root causes of the problems that we all see, because the ambition to bring patients effective, innovative treatments, that is something we all stand behind. So what can be done in a systematic way?
Birte Byskov, there's a comment to you from Rita Christensen, who is engaged in, I think, in some patient groups around KOL. And she says that it is well said, what you said, and that they are working with many rare diseases in the lymphoma area. So please contact them on lyle.dk, lyle.dk. So now I have this comment for you. And then there is a question I would like here from, which was, yeah, from an anonymous, that was a difficult one, anonymous attendee. When it comes to access to treatment, what would you define to be the biggest barrier today for ensuring access to potential treatments in rare diseases in Sweden and Denmark at a stage when the market authorizations from EMA is available? I don't know if it is you, Birte, or who could answer that.
Well, I could say generally as I said before, why all this effort for rare diseases if the patient cannot have access to the treatments anyhow? So we have a big problem there. And we just have to say, looking back on the many years we have had this regulation and have seen all the new products coming in, we have not solved this problem with access to the medicines. There's been a lot of discussion about it, a lot of trying to efforts trying to put up European corporations and so on, and we have not actually solved the problem. And as I said before, why is it so difficult for the European member states to cooperate on this point when they can cooperate in other questions? So I think we have to, should we say, be more open, more positive on how to find suitable models, suitable framework to really tackle this problem. It is, for instance, the problem with the scarce evidence when these products come to the national authorities. Why don't we work together actually how to collect this missing data? And if you go and see the suggestions, the contribution from Eurodis, there are ideas. There are a lot of ideas on how we could go on this point, because we have to solve it. We have to solve it, or it doesn't make sense to make a lot of new regulations and new rules and so on if we can't solve this problem with access.
And sort of to follow that, there is a question which I hope you, Jonas, could maybe ask or could answer quite briefly. It says that the pharma companies, that they should involve themselves more in the community so they can get information from patients. Now we are talking about data also, Birte also mentioned that. So are you already doing that a lot, and could you do that more, and do you see that as a way forward?
Can you please repeat the question?
She's asking it is about how much pharma companies are involving themselves in the communities directly with the patients to get more data out of it. Is it something that you could do more, and how much are you already doing it, and is that a way forward?
We can absolutely do more, I would say, but when it comes to real world data and patient inclusion, and I've seen lots of progress and discussion during the last 5 years, I would say. So there is a awareness of this. There is a thinking of this, that patients should be included in the development and process and the decision on reimbursement and so forth. But I would say we can absolutely do more. And this needs to be done in a proper way, of course, in a scientific way, in a transparent way. But obviously, if you are to develop drugs for these very rare conditions, many times we lack the scientific data on the disease itself if you compare to the bigger ones. So we need to have a systematic approach on how to gather information and data on and the experience from the patients is key here, of course.
Lina, this goes to you, because it's around this cross-border healthcare where we need these maybe treatment centers. There it's asked, in some countries, government authority bodies have strong roles in coordinating this cross-border healthcare. In others, it's more like companies in collaborations with local experts raising it. Do you see any preferred ways from the political point of view?
I suppose that depends on who you ask. I'd say what's most important is that we, in case this is the direction we want to go, we need a framework for when, in what cases should this kind of collaboration take place? When is this a possibility for the patient? When is it a possibility when it comes to just a consultation, maybe, to be sure you're on the right way? When is it a possibility to actually get the treatment in another country? And after that, I'd say that how each and every country actually arrange it, that's not so important. The important thing is that whatever disease or whatever condition I end up with, it shouldn't mean life falls apart. I should still get the best care, no matter where I live and no matter what happens to me.
From Siva Narayanan, there is a question and a comment, and it starts with: thanks for this terrific panel discussion. I lead an organization, Avant Health, that collaborates with both patient organizations and pharma industry across regions. My brief question for the entire panel relates to European reference networks for rare diseases. The European reference networks currently aim to create a governance structure for knowledge sharing and care coordination across the EU. Is there a way that the European reference networks could be leveraged better than how it stands now? And it needs to be rather short answers from each of you. Birte, could you start?
Yes, of course. I think that the European reference networks should have a very central role, because it would be natural when we talk about collecting real life or real world data. It should be natural to involve the European reference networks in this work. So yes, I think that the ERNs should be a very important have a very important role in the future development of products or treatment for the rare diseases, and the follow-up on how this treatments works, and also the needs they can see from their knowledge of rare diseases. As I said before, we need a lot of research and clinical research, knowledge about the natural history of rare diseases and how treatments are working on the long run, so to say, for the patients. So I very much hope that the ERN will get a very central role when it comes to the future developments.
Jonas or Lina, do any of you have anything to add on this, on how ERNs can be leveraged? Lina?
No, I just want to say that I completely agree, and that, I mean, it's even in the name. It's a reference network. That's the entire point, that they should spread knowledge and keep in contact. And I think that we can see with the reference networks on COVID-19, for instance, this sort of potential in making sure that knowledge is spread without all these extra steps passing me and myself, I and all my colleagues. I think it's a very, very good platform to use. So yes.
Jonas, anything to add just for?
I fully agree.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And I think that we are getting closer to the end. I just want to mention that people are thanking you for your answers. And another one is writing, it's a fantastic discussion, and also had a question on the ERNs that I think you already answered. And then there is this, I would like to end with this from Mihaela Veringa from Sweden. She's asking, and I will actually answer on behalf of you because I talked to you on beforehand, all of you. She says, will you all stay committed in the upcoming years to advocate for rare disease patients and strengthen this ecosystem? And since I've talked to all of you, I can say, Michaela, that I'm really sure, because they are all very passionate about this and they're putting a lot of effort into it. And just that you show up today and have prepared well, I mean, it sort of makes me optimistic that we are actually going to move forward for the next 20 years as well, so that hopefully what Terkel showed has happened for the last 20 years, we can do even better for the next 20. So on behalf of EUCOPE, I would like to thank, of course, all of you panelists for taking your time. I would like to thank Terkel Andersen for giving his keynote speak. And then I would like to thank each one of you who has followed this discussion today, because that is also very important, that we spread this knowledge and that we sort of keep fighting for people with rare diseases and for their relatives. So thank you all for joining and have a very nice day.